this computer, and there might be other people who want to join. So, okay. All right. So thanks for joining me tonight for Nourishing Life. So this is an ongoing series that I'm trying to do through the library. And what I'm hoping to do is every season do an update so that you can learn about the tips and the advice to get the most out of your, kind of maximize your health during the seasons. So tonight we're going to talk about the nature, the essence, and the functions of the seasons. Each season has a specific function that has to get fulfilled for health in the following season. And so I'm hoping by the end of this, you really see the importance of paying attention and kind of living in the spirit of the season, and then learn to recognize seasons in different areas of your life and to act accordingly, kind of in accord with the season. So first I'm going to talk about seasons as breath motions. And then at the end, we're going to talk about specific tips to live with the spring season. If you did the class on grief and depression, I talked about the liver, and the liver is the organ that needs the most attention during the spring. So I'm going to talk about tips to make the liver system happy. And okay, so what is the season? So in this Chinese medicine, and I'm referencing like 2,400 years ago, the beginnings of Chinese medicine, a season is a breath motion over time. So a breath motion is an inhale and an exhale. And the inhale is so it's yin and yang. In the West, we talk a lot about yin and yang as being male and female, sun and moon, light and dark. Well, the original definition of yin and yang was yin was energy that comes back to the root, and in the human body, that's the core of the body below the navel. And yang is something that goes away from the root. So that's the breath movement of the universe, and everything has this breath motion. So the male, female, light, dark, that's like a secondary definition of yin and yang that came later. But initially it was moving away from the root is yang, coming back in towards the root is yin. And so like the Big Bang, we think about there was this big black void, supposedly, before the Big Bang. That was intense yin. That was intense, like focused inward. A very dark, there was nothing but this dark stillness. And then the Big Bang with this explosion out was extreme yang. And so in this theory, I think physicists still say that the universe is expanding, but the idea is at some point the universe would start to contract. An ocean wave. So if you think about the ocean as being the root of yin, of water, a wave going to the shore away from the ocean is yang, and when the wave recedes is yin. Okay, so we're going to talk about more examples, but this is the idea. Away from the root is yang, back in towards the root is yin. And so everything has a breath motion, and all the breath motions are made of seasons, and you can identify the seasons within a breath motion. So I'm just going to talk about the breath because I think it's kind of a cool way to start experiencing this before we talk about seasons and climate. So what the winter of your breath is the gap or the pause before you inhale. It's where you're not inhaling or exhaling. Your lungs are kind of still. That's the root. That's the maximum yin of the breath. And then when you start to inhale, that's spring coming on in the breath. And then when you get to about halfway of your inhale, the breath has shifted to summer, and it's starting to come to fullness and flourishing. And when you get to the top of the inhale, that's maximum yang, maximum like maturity of the breath. And then as you start to exhale, you shift to autumn, and it starts to fall. And I'm going to use fall more than autumn because I like the idea of falling back into the root. So when you exhale, you fall back to the root. So the whole exhale is yin. And so as it gets closer and closer to the end of the exhale, it's more and more yin until you get to that place of gap and pause. Okay, does that make sense? You with me? Okay, so breath motions in any manifestation are circular, so they don't jump around. They flow in a very specific order. So like if you inhale, you can't suddenly, well, you can hold your breath, but you can't go back to that rooted gap place in the breath without going through the exhale. Or like, in our seasons, you can't jump from winter to summer. You're always going to go winter, spring, summer, fall, autumn. And this is true. This is like the archetype of a season, is it's always moving in a circle. And it's always renewing. So every time you go back to winter, it's this dark, still, quiet time where it looks like nothing's happening, but actually there's a lot of regenerating life happening in this dark stillness. And then you move to spring and life renews itself. And then you move to summer, life flourishes, reaches maturity. And then in the fall, it starts to die away. Like something dies, there's a little bit of sense of things falling apart and going back to the winter and back to the root, back to the maximum yin. And then the cycle goes all over again. So it's a really important thing to think about, is this, it's always a circular nature. Let's see. And then I just want to talk a little bit, I just kind of throw out this phrase all the time. What does it mean to live in harmony with nature? And I was like, I should maybe talk about that in a little more detail. So in this context, living in harmony means being aware of the movement of yin and yang and as it transforms in your life. So that means being aware when the energy of something is in the root, in a still, dark, kind of germinating place. And then when it's moving away, developing, blooming, blossoming, maturing, and then falling away, and then coming back to the root. So by living in harmony, really what we're starting to do is develop skills of deeply listening to the outside world and inside our bodies, to align and attune with the energy and the intention and the actions and the forces of nature and even the universe. So if you can be aware, whether it's a season of weather or it's something happening in your life, if you can be aware of what season you're in, are you wintering, are you springing, summering, falling, or back to wintering, it allows you to kind of surf the wave. You're not fighting against life, you're really moving with life. And the Chinese medical texts say that if you move contrary to this motion, the circular motion from winter back to winter, it opens you up to diseases because you haven't wintered properly or wintered well. You haven't accomplished the function of the winter season. So in the medical text, they'll say if you don't winter well, you're going to have specific types of illnesses in the spring. If you don't spring well, you're going to have specific types of illnesses in the summer. And it just goes on like that. So like, for example, you plant a seed. Okay, I have a crazy dog and my husband just let her in. So if you hear her traveling around. So for example, planting a seed starts the cycle of growth and seasons. If you plant a seed and it goes into the dark, still, quiet earth, and it doesn't have the best conditions, like it doesn't have water, doesn't have the nutrients, doesn't have enough time and darkness, when spring comes around, that seed might not bud out, it might not germinate, it might not make it above ground, or it might sprout, but it might not be a very healthy plant because that root action, like that stage of development didn't happen well. And then when it gets to summer, if that plant's already kind of behind, when it matures, it won't be the best version of that plant. So that's, or like thinking about education. So kindergarten through say high school, that's one big season. And within that, every year is a season. But you know that if a child doesn't get a solid kindergarten, pre-K kindergarten kind of foundation, every year they move through the educational system, they have weaknesses. And they're going to show up eventually. And the more you go along, the more those weaknesses will show up. So that's the idea. If you don't live in harmony and kind of fulfill the function of the season, there'll be weaknesses that appear down the road. Okay. Does anybody have any questions? No. Okay. Hopefully that's making sense. I'm like, it makes sense in my head. Hopefully it makes sense to you guys. All right. So I just wanted to do a little breathing exercise to get you guys in touch with the seasons of the breath. So what I'd like you to do is just sit comfortably with your feet on the floor and have your spine upright, not too tense or tight, not too loose. And I like to close my eyes, but you can keep your eyes open if you'd like to. And so the first thing I'd like you to do is just start breathing slowly and deeply. And I'd like you to try to breathe into your lower belly. And I don't want you working too hard. I don't want you efforting, but just try to bring your breath down into your lower belly. And this is where your root is. It's about 2 inches below your navel and about 2 inches in front of your spine. And so the root of your body, it's a dark, black, quiet, still place. And if you notice that thoughts arise, or you've stopped noticing your breath, just notice that and gently bring your awareness back to your breath. So I just want you to take several breaths and just be aware of the breath coming in and going out. Okay, next, I'm going to shift. And as you inhale, I want you to think arising. It's like something's being born, arising. And then as you exhale, think dying away. And see if you can kind of notice the transition between the inhale and the exhale at the top of the breath, and the exhale and the inhale at the bottom of the breath. And then let's just do several breaths of just thinking arising and dying away. Okay, so the next step is I want you to see if you can start to feel the seasons. So as you inhale, the very beginning of the inhale, I want you to think spring. And then as the breath gets fuller and reaches its peak, think summer. And as you exhale, think fall. And then at the pause, at the end of the exhale, before the next inhale, I want you to think winter. Okay, and don't think too hard, just think lightly, but see if you can just start to identify these different transitions between the different phases of the breath. Okay, now we'll just do several of these. We'll spend a little more time here. So the winter, that gap is it's where the new breath takes shape. And the spring is the budding forth of the new breath. And then the summer is the flourishing and thriving of the breath. And then the exhale is falling back to the root. It's that individual breath dying away. And the cycle repeats. Okay. All right. How did that go? Does anybody want to have any thoughts or have anything they want to share?
I really like that way of thinking about it. This is Caitlin.
Okay.
Of like imagining your breath in like a circle in the seasons. Because I've always tried to kind of meditate, but I've never felt really like super connected with it. But I feel like thinking of it in that cycle, I really like that.
Okay, cool. I'm glad that you could relate to that. Good. Anybody else? So this is going to be the theme of the whole rest of the talk, is about this circular nature and this returning to the root, stillness, darkness, quiet, moving to spring, budding forth, moving to summer, flourishing, fall, dying away, and returning to the root. Okay, so some other key points about the nature of seasons. Each season is really critical and has a function and is a foundation of the next season, like I said before. And it's really important to just kind of surrender to the seasons and don't resist or fight them. Like it's normal to have a preference for some seasons. Like some people love spring, love fall, hate winter. And that's fine, but like trying to resist winter, resist summer, you're like fighting the entire flow of the universe or the flow of a river. And I like to think of the seasons, whether we're talking outside or inside, internally, as verbs. So I'm going to talk about wintering, springing, summering, and falling. So let's just talk in a little more detail about what each of the seasons is. So winter, or wintering, as I've said, is the beginning. It's the root. It's the maximum yin. And its nature is to be hidden and dark. Like you think about the long nights of the physical winter, quiet, still, cold. The nature of cold, it causes things to contract. And so what that does to us emotionally and psychologically kind of focuses us inwardly and internally. And this is the place where life renews itself. And it's associated with mystery, seeds, germination, pregnancy, and it might not appear that anything's happening, like trees look dormant, but the stage is being set for all of life and every creation in that dark, still place. So quiet doesn't mean a lack of life. It's just moving at a very slow rate. And so in Chinese medicine, we say it's a time of closing and storing. And Like, for example, COVID quarantine, that was an imposed, sudden, quick wintering that was put on us, unless you were an essential worker that had to go be in the world, where things got very still in the world. Things got quiet. You know, we couldn't go out and go to concerts and go to restaurants and, you know, like do our normal activities. So even though it came down in the middle of March, it was a really intense wintering time. So the essence of winter, to create something new in life, it has to start in the dark. So in a little while, we're going to do an exercise where I want you to identify something you want to create in your life. And it's going to be really important that you keep new ideas, new plans, goals, dreams to yourself while you're wintering. Because otherwise it's like digging up a seed and seeing how it's going, you know, or this sounds gross, but cutting open a body to see how the baby is developing. You know, it's really important that it stays in that dark place. And in terms of our lives, you want to, when you're wintering, you want to allow your will, and that means like your drives, your desires to act in the world, to be hidden and concealed. So closing and storing means closed to the external world physically, if it's like a plant, or psychologically, if it's something that process you're going through. So spring, or springing, after this time of being closed and concealed, is called a time of emerge and display. And this is the beginning of the yang, where you're starting to move away from the root. So the Chinese medical classics say that everything under heaven and on earth is born during this time. Life is moving out from the root with new growth. So outside in nature, you know, little buds are coming out on trees and shrubs, you know, vegetables are sprouting, a lot of animals are born in the spring. So it's a time when you emerge from the darkness and this new growth happens. And initially it's delicate and tender and vulnerable. And then as it goes through springing, becomes more robust. And I didn't talk about this. In winter, the emotion associated with winter is fear. And the way I interpret that is that it's all about darkness and the unknown. You've saved and you've stored in the fall. Did you save and store enough? When spring comes, what's going to happen? There are a lot of unknowns. And so the emotion is fear. In spring, the emotion is anger and frustration. And I think in this context, it's seen as a positive thing, in that when a seed germinates, it has to have a certain amount of energy to push up through the soil, break through the crust of the surface of the soil, and emerge out in the world. So that takes a little, you know, so, you know, there might be some frustration that, you know, you can't break through. So anger and frustration have positive aspects. And if you're too frustrated, though, it turns into the negative expression of anger and frustration. Okay, so then summering. So after emerge and display, it's a time of thrive and flourish. So this is the time of maximum yang, maximum time away or place away from the root. You know, this is when vegetables, you know, grow and can be harvested, fruits develop and until they're mature. It's about ripeness and maturity and the peak growth of anything. The color's red, and the emotion is joy. So it's the joy of thriving and flourishing and being at your height of power and creativity. And then fall, or falling, after thriving and flourishing, it moves into contain and balance. I don't understand the use of the word balance here so much, but contain, you think about harvesting and starting to bring in, like, harvest the wheat, harvest the apples, bringing things in. So it's the beginning of the time of yin. So you've gotten to maximum yang expansion, and then it's the time when you start to bring things back in towards the root. And interestingly, like root crops and things, we store in a root cellar. So the fall is the time of filling the root cellar, moving back to the root. So you're storing the fruits of summer's flourishing. So animals hoard food, hibernating animals put on fat, they prepare their nests. Let's see, we harvest fruits and grains, we return back to the root. And there's a sense in the fall when we're falling back towards the root, that there's something is cut off and that something is starting to die away. So like what trees do is, the point where the stem of a leaf attaches to a branch, the tree actually cuts off the life and the nutrients to the leaf. So life energy is actually cut off when fall. And then the tree starts pulling its energy back into its core to make it through the winter. So there's this sense of growing apart, getting cut off, dying away. That's kind of the energy of fall and falling. We tear the apples off the trees, we tear the grains away from the plants. There's this breaking off. The color is white and the emotion is grief. And I just think this is a time of something dying away. And maybe it's something you really loved and cherished, that is something's dying away. So the key point to remember here is that if there's no winter, if you don't close and store and have dark, quiet stillness, there is no spring, or the spring is kind of stunted. There's no or less growth and life. And without spring, there's no flourishing and thriving in the summer, or it's stunted or reduced. And without a flourishing, thriving summer, there's no containing, harvesting, autumning, falling. And then if the force of fall is not strong, you can't go back to close and store and revitalize life. So that's why living in harmony with the seasons is important. Does anybody have any questions? Is that making sense? Yeah, okay. Unless I hear otherwise, I'll just keep going. So before we talk about supporting your bodies and your health during the spring, I just wanted to give you some other examples of the seasonal cycle in our lives. So we talk about the seasons of the life. So during pregnancy, that's the winter of your life, in the dark, below ground, not out in the world. A lot of change in life is happening. It's setting the stage for your life. Spring of your life is like birth to mid-20s. And then summer is like your mid-20s, I'm going to say to your late 30s or mid-40s. The Chinese medical texts say your spring or your summer ends in the mid-30s, but I think we have, longer life expectancy. Our spring lasts a little longer. So that kind of height of our creativity, physical robustness, say goes from mid-20s to the mid-40s. Fall, let's say, is mid-40s to your 60s. And then the winter of our lives is our 60s and until death. And then the day has seasons. So winter of the 24-hour cycle is nightfall, middle of the night until dawn. And then spring of the day is going to be dawn until about mid-morning. Summer of the day is going to be mid-morning to about mid-afternoon. And then fall is mid-afternoon until nightfall. And then winter of the day starts again. So the winter of the day is when it's dark, that's yin. As you get to the middle of the night, it's maximum yin. And then as you move towards dawn, yang starts to rise. And then during the morning to the mid-morning, yang's rising. Yang peaks around the middle of the day and then falls at the end of the afternoon. And then the day returns to its root to rejuvenate again for another day. So like an art project can have seasons. So the winter of an art project would be like, you have an idea for an art project and you think about it, you imagine it, you dream it, you see it finished, but it's all about you thinking about it internally, living with it, but you're not really doing anything about it. And you're not telling people about it so that they can rip your seedling out and stomp on it. And then the spring of your project is like you start noticing you feel like, say, buying some art supplies, or maybe going to a museum and getting some ideas. Or maybe you start making some sketches, depending on your medium. And then by the time you've gone through spring, you get to summer and you are firing on all cylinders, and you are making your project, and you're making it become a reality, and you complete your art project. And then in the fall, it's like you enjoy the fruits of your creation, and you kind of separate it from it a little bit, like you let it go into the world, whether it doesn't have to be in a gallery, but it can be like letting it go, calling it complete, and enjoying that. And then in winter, that idea is past. Maybe you winter again and start thinking about the next art project. Relationships have seasons. So the winter of a relationship might be, you really recognize that you have a desire for a relationship. You're not in a relationship, say. And then in the spring, maybe you meet somebody, and then you have the early stages where everything's budding and blossoming, very exciting, getting to know each other. Everything's new and fun. And then the summer of the relationship is like, hey, Laura, I'm going to mute you real quick.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. And then in the summer, it's like you're at the height of the relationship. You're settled in together. There's a sense of flourishing. You might have ups and downs, but you're getting along really well. There's a sense of happiness, completion, and wholeness in the relationship. And in the fall, I have to think about this a lot, but I feel like in relationships, the fall has to do with that, like that cutting away. There's like a moving away from the other person. And this doesn't mean the relationship ends, but there is a time where you've come together, and now you're starting to kind of break away. Or maybe you're coming back into yourself, or maybe you're really enjoying the fruits of your flourishing time. But there's a sense that a phase of the relationship has ended, and there's something dying, and it's really that say the initial phase of the relationship. And then you go into winter, and it's dark, it's death, it's internal, and maybe that relationship dies, and that's what winter marks. But it's also possible that that phase of the relationship has died. You winter in that relationship, and then you come out in spring on the other side, and the relationship is renewed. About 25 years ago, I had a friend who was really struggling in her marriage. She'd been married for a long time, like 25 years. And she told me that every 10 years, a relationship dies and is remade. And this is really the sense of that. There are seasons in a relationship that if you start to pay attention, you can notice. And then an example of seasons of an illness are like the winter of an illness is the seeds have been planted in your body, but you don't have any symptoms yet. It's growing in you, but there's no outward manifestation. Maybe you can't even feel anything yet. And then the spring of an illness is symptoms start to emerge. And, maybe it's light symptoms, maybe they develop, over several months or years, and they get stronger, but there's a sense that the illness has started to emerge in your awareness and physically in your body, where it can start to be measured. And then the summer of the illness is, the illness is full blown. It could be a cold, it could be pneumonia, it could be cancer, but it's like, if it's something like a cold, maybe you don't get treatment, but if it's a more serious illness, this is a time where you're like, I need treatment. And then in fall, something dies away, and really what dies away is the illness. And so once you get back to winter, either the illness itself has died away and you're healed, or maybe you physically die. So it's the body can physically die. Okay, so those are just some other examples of what seasons look like in different areas of our lives. What do you guys think? Do you have any questions? No? Making sense? kind of getting the feel for it? Okay, so I just wanted to give you an example of something in my life, seasons in my life. So I lived in Seattle for like 30 years and moved back here at the end of 2018. So the winter of this process was I was really unhappy in Seattle for a lot of years, but I didn't do much about it. I was in that time of closing and storing. And I occasionally talked about the desire to move with close friends and family, but I was in this place of just thinking about moving for like 10 or 15 years. So winter obviously doesn't have to be that long, but it can be a really long time. And then when I moved into the spring of the process of moving away from Seattle, I occasionally looked at property. I would Google different small towns that I heard about. I'd see what life was like there. So I started having my radar up for ideas, and I started looking into something. And there was overlap with winter, wasn't talking about it a lot, but I think that went on for about 5 years. And then in summer 2009, my husband and I came to Telluride. He'd never been here. And we ended up looking at land and fell in love with a parcel on Wilson Mesa. We decided within a weekend to buy this land and move to Wilson Mesa. And we would come out in the summer. There was no house. We would camp on our land. We were just so happy. And so I think it took us 10 years between buying the land to building a house and moving. So I consider that the summer of the process of moving away from Seattle. We were just so happy and exploring the area. And then in the fall, we designed the house, we saved the money, designed the house, built the house, and started letting go of Seattle. So mentally, emotionally, we were starting to transition to Wilson Mesa. And so our life in Seattle started dying away, and our attachment to Seattle started dying away. And then winter was, we left Seattle, that chapter of our lives ended, and then became the root of building our new lives out here. Okay, so literally you can think of anything and break it down and identify the seasons, just like we did with the breath in that initial exercise. Okay, so how are we doing on time? Okay, so just some more key points about seasons. They don't, as I've been talking, they don't have to correspond to external seasons. You might get, so pregnancy is a time of wintering, but you might get pregnant in the summer. And so like with your career or your job, winter would be like you want a new job, you want a new career, but you might be in the fall of your current career. You're dying away from your current career. There's always an overlap between seasons, just within the outside world. We're not always done fully with one season, as when the signs of the next season start to appear. Not all seasons are the same length. Like in Telluride, winter's very long. In California, winter's really short. And then I want you to really be thinking about the circular nature of the seasons, not linear. It's a cycle of coming around and around, of renewing, being born, maturing, dying back, going back to the time of renewal. Let's see. I talked about that. Okay. All right. Does anybody have questions before we do another little exercise? Okay. Okay. So if you have a pen and paper, here's what we're going to do. What I'd like you to do is identify something that you've created in your life. And this could be anything. It could be a job, piece of art, a new skill, a hobby, an illness, improving your health, a relationship, adopting a pet, buying a house plant. It can be anything. And what I want you to do is, I don't want you to have to think about it too hard, but just identify and sketch out what the seasons look like. Just think about when you wintered, what did that look like? When you started springing, what actions did you first take in the world? When you summered and this came to fruition, what did that look like? When you started falling back to the root, what did that look like? And then I'd like you to think about, were any of the seasons hard for you? Was wintering hard? Was spring hard? Was fall hard? Were any of the seasons especially fun and joyful? Notice that. Did you try to cling to any season or avoid any season? Often, if we pick any example, uh, like say, if you don't like a season in one aspect of your life, it's very likely that you don't like it in other aspects of your life. Like for some people, wintering is really hard and they wear shorts and flip-flops in January, you know, or they hate the heat of summer. And so just notice if there was any kind of resistance or a special joy in any of the seasons. And then if you've been through all the seasons of whatever this thing you created, have you started to return to winter yet? You know, or, you know, can you recognize that returning to winter? Does that make sense? Okay, so I'm just going to give you guys like 3 or 4 minutes. I really don't want you thinking too hard, but just see if you can kind of sketch this out. And I'm just going to be sitting here if you have questions. Okay, if you guys are done, you can raise your hand or we'll give about 30 more seconds unless you want more time. Okay, do you guys want more time? No? Anybody thumbs up? Okay. All right. Does anybody want to share their seasons? And no pressure at all. Going once, going twice. Did you find this exercise at all helpful for thinking about seasons in some aspect of your life? Okay, I see one person nodding. Okay. All right. All right. Well, if nobody feels like sharing, that's totally fine. So we'll just move on to talking about nourishing the physical body during the physical spring. This is going to be a lot of review. If you did my depression and grief class back in January, this is going to be a lot of review, but I think it's good to hear these things over and over. Okay, so we've come out, it's late spring here in Colorado. In Dallas, it's probably summer already. So we have emerged from winter, this darkness, stillness, quiet. So after this time of being concealed and storing, we're in this phase of emerging and displaying. Life's moving out from the root with new growth. And we see that in the trees and the plants. Like looking out on Wilson Mesa, finally there's things are starting to turn green. There are not yet leaves on the trees. So the color is green, especially bright green, like that bright, really vivid green of new buds and new growth. So like one of the things you can do is wear green, and really notice it. Like if you're out in the world and really look at the trees and the shrubs and the green grass growing on the highway or in your yard, and really soak up that energy of this new growth and in just the plants and around you. Another thing that makes the liver happy. Okay, so the liver, the liver is not just the physical organ. It has a number of different functions, and one of the things it does is keeps things moving through your body. And so that means, like, if something's tight or blocked, if the liver is happy, it bursts through that blockage and keeps the blood and the fluids moving. It keeps the lymph coming from your head and your arms and your legs back to the heart, where it's reabsorbed into the body. So it's really important to keep the liver happy, because that means the circulation is moving, and then all the parts of the body are going to get the blood and the nutrients they need to be happy. Okay, so another way to keep your liver system happy is to spend time in nature. So maybe that means walking outside. Maybe that means leaning against a tree in the park or in the woods and just just soaking up that tree. You can even get a house plant. Like that even counts as spending time in nature. And really what spending time in nature is about, or like taking care of a house plant, is bringing your attention and your intention to supporting life and tending life and supporting growth. That's the spirit and the energy and the function of spring. Do movement that brings you joy. So it doesn't matter what it is. It could be running, dancing, hiking, jumping rope, hula hooping. It doesn't matter. That what matters is that you're moving and you feel joy in that movement. And this is so like whatever makes you smile. So this is all about getting your body moving, your blood pumping to all of your extremities, and endorphins pumping. Makes your liver very happy. So the liver is associated with the part of the soul that is all about, has a mission in the world. It has something it wants to fulfill in this lifetime. So journal, make art, write songs, whatever, to get in touch with your dreams and desires. The springtime is a really great time to do that. So who are you? What are you yearning for? And then if you identify that, maybe then you winter about it, like by going into winter about it. So foods that really support the body and the liver in the springtime. There was a handout, hopefully you guys got it from Laura, came out this afternoon. So you'll include small amounts of these foods regularly in your diet, and you'll eat produce that's listed in season. So one of the first things about food is you want to eat less at each meal to make digestion easier. So the easier it is for your body to extract those nutrients from what you eat, the more those nutrients get into your blood and to the tissues that need them. So that means eating your main meals earlier in the day. So ideally you eat your biggest meal of the day at noon, and then a lighter meal at dinner, and then because when you re-enter yin time in the evening, your digestion is going to slow down. So if you eat a huge dinner at night, that's a lot of stress on the body. So try to eat the biggest meal earlier in the day. To keep the liver happy, we recommend, when you look at your plate of food, 40 to 60% is vegetables. And then complex carbs are about 30%, and protein is only about 10%. So to support in the spirit of having green in your life, lots of green vegetables are really great for the liver. Kale, broccoli, spinach, baby bok choy, lettuce. Really recommend only eating salads in the summer when it's hot. chard, so green things. And then also like the body, it's easier to digest if you stir fry or steam things, cook or saute them, cook them lightly. You maintain a lot of nutrients. They kind of start pre-digesting by being cooked. So baking and roasting tends to dry things out, so your body loses out on moisture. And frying just puts a lot of heat in the body and causes all kinds of problems if you do it too much. So other foods that are good for the liver are onions and garlic. These are kind of warmer foods that get the blood moving. Turmeric, basil, mints, peppers, cardamom, cumin, ginger. Those are all really good for the liver. And you want to eat small amounts of sour foods. So that could be citrus, little bits of vinegar, pickles, plums, something that's got a little bit of sour, but not too much. So as important as things that you want to add in, the list of things to restrict or avoid are really, really important for the liver. They're not as important for other organs. So the things that are really important to avoid, especially during the springtime, are processed foods, junk foods, excess sugar, foods high in fats and oils, excessive hot and spicy foods, alcohol, excess cold foods, unnecessary drugs or intoxicants, eating when you're upset or stressed out or under pressure, and skipping meals, very stressful for the liver, eating quickly and overeating. All of those things stress the liver. All right. Any questions about that? That makes sense? Okay, and then if you guys want, like I created a couple of YouTube videos of a couple of simple Qigongs you can do to make the liver happy. We have about 5 more minutes. If you want to stay and do that, I'm happy to go through it. In the handout, there's a link to the YouTube channel. And before we do that, I just want to say, this is a really great book. This is at the bottom of your resource. It's called Wintering: The Power of Rest and Retreat in Difficult Times. This woman's a writer. I got this from our library in Telluride. I promise I'll return it at some point, but it's really great. As you can tell, I'm big into wintering. I just wanted to say, wintering does not have to be difficult times, but I think that if you avoid and resist wintering, it can be difficult because there's resistance. And so the winter comes in and whacks you over the head. Anyway, I think she does a really great job in just personal essay form, talking about some things that happened in her life, about wintering and moving through these stages. And then the book Live Well and Live Long, I've been recommending all winter in terms of if you want to learn more about these Chinese health approaches to building health in your life. Okay, so 6:26, do people want to go over the Qigong together, or do you feel done? Well, maybe unmute and tell me how you.
Yeah, I do have to go, but that's okay.
Okay, so the link to both of the exercises is in the handout. And so what I did was the beginning of the video, and they're not very long, is instruction, and then I just practice, and then you could practice along with me.
Right.
And it includes everything I'm going to say now. So
okay.
Well,
all right, thanks, Diane.
Yeah, thanks for coming. All right. All right, bye. Okay. Are you gonna take off, Laura? Oh, okay. All right, so I have Patty, Jenny, Caitlin. Maybe you guys could just unmute and tell me what you want to do.
I could do either way. If you guys want to stay, I would stay, but I don't need to.
Patty or
Yeah.
Jenny?
I can do it. I'm staying.
You're staying. Okay. All right. We got one person staying. We're doing this. Okay. All right. Hopefully you guys can still see and hear me.
Yes.
Okay, cool. All right, so the first one is it's called Qigong to tonify the liver. And it's all about establishing or reestablishing the healthy breath motion of the liver. So every organ has a breath motion. It's a way it physically moves in the body for optimal health. So for the liver, it's this kind of front and back motion. And so our Qigong is going to encourage that motion. So we're going to start with the feet about hip width apart, and just a little bit of, don't want to be standing up with your butt sticking out, kind of sink into your heels, bend your knees just slightly. And we're going to start with the palms up, touching the side of the body. And this is actually right about where your hands hit, is a very important acupuncture point on both sides to strengthen the liver and harmonize it, make it happy. So what we're going to do is we're going to, doesn't matter which arm you use first, we're going to bring it out away from the body and turn the palm down. The opposite hand the palm is still up. And then we're going to bring it in, and they're going to change sides. So now the opposite hand is extended, palm is down, the original hand is palm up along the rib cage. And then we're going to do it again. And then there's a little bit of up and down motion, because it's not just front and back. It's got an up and down. And you want to be careful to not over rotate. So you don't want to be doing this. That's too much. It's like barely, it's like maybe a 5-degree turn from the midline. And so you can just do this for 10 times or 2 minutes or 5 minutes. And the breathing can just be natural. If you fall into a rhythm of like inhaling on one side and exhaling on the other side, that's fine. But don't think about the breath too much with this one. And this is kind of a good speed. In the video, I've got kind of an extended practice time, and you can get into the rhythm of the speed. You don't want to do it too fast. Things don't move. The body doesn't like to move that fast with these Qigong exercises. Okay? All right, any questions? Okay, thumbs up, good. All right, so next we'll do Qigong, Qigong. So this is really good for the liver, partly because we're gonna put our arms up and down. The liver rests below the diaphragm. This gets the diaphragm moving. So that helps the liver have some up and down motion to it. If your diaphragm is really stuck, you're going to have an unhappy liver, because it wants the back and forth, but it needs a little bit of up and down. So now we're going to encourage the up and down more specifically. I also think this is really good to do in the spring, because it's a tree, it's a living thing, gets you thinking about trees and trees budding out in the spring. So we're going to start again with the feet about hip width apart. And this one, the breathing does matter. We're going to inhale. And then all the way to the top. And then when I get to the top, I'm going to flick my fingers, just a little spark at the top. And then exhale, back to the root. We're going to have a little wintering pause. And then inhale, spring, summer, peak of summer, flick. Fall back to the root, exhale. And this is an exercise where you can really think of returning to the root in your lower abdomen. Inhale. Flick. Exhale, falling back to the root. This is a really great exercise for thinking about the seasons within a breath. Spring, summer, peak summer, falling back to the root. Winter, spring, inhale, summer, peak young. Exhale, falling back to the root, back to the yin. Do a few more. Just do one more. All right, that's Qigong. Any questions? All right, that's all I got for you guys tonight. I hope that, that was useful and that you have some takeaways that you can apply in daily life. So, my contact info is on the handout. So if you have any questions about the material or thoughts you want to share, I'd love to hear from you. So you're always welcome to get in touch. Okay.
Thank you so
Thank you
much.
so much.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for coming and joining me tonight. I really appreciate it. It's great to see you guys. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Bye-bye. Bye, Patty.
Bye.